I built a $60 million empire with my dad, then he gave it all to my brother and shut me out. My name is Sienna Cole. I was 19 when my dad asked me to join his business, and if I'm being honest, there wasn't much to join. The warehouse was falling apart, leaks in the ceiling, machines that broke down without warning, and shelves that were never fully stocked. The company had 5 employees, all exhausted, all quietly expecting things to fail. Bills came faster than payments. Clients didn't stay long. But when he looked at me and said, "I need your help," I didn't hesitate. I didn't say yes because it made sense. I said yes because it was him. Growing up, I spent more time in that warehouse than anywhere else, sitting on cold concrete floors, watching him work, believing that one day I'd be part of something he built. This felt like that moment. I didn't ask about salary. I didn't ask about ownership. I just said yes. Looking back, that was my first mistake. The work was relentless from day one. I handled everything: shipping, customer complaints, vendor negotiations, even cleaning when no one else stayed late. Some nights, I slept on a worn couch in the office because going home felt like wasted time. But somewhere, in that chaos, I started noticing things. And once I saw them, I couldn't ignore them. The moment everything changed almost didn't happen. We were weeks away from missing payroll when a potential client reached out. It wasn't a massive deal, but it was big enough to stabilize us if we handled it right. The problem was, we weren't ready. Our systems were inconsistent. Our reputation wasn't strong. And the client had better options. My dad hesitated. "We're not there yet," he said. I disagreed. Not because I was overconfident, but because I understood what losing meant. I spent 2 weeks preparing like everything depended on it. I studied competitors, broke down pricing, rebuilt our proposal from scratch, and created something that positioned us as more than we were. When we walked into that meeting, they barely acknowledged us. That didn't change how I spoke. I stayed steady, focused, clear even when I wasn't. Halfway through, something shifted. They leaned forward, asked questions, engaged. By the end, they said yes. That one decision changed everything. That night, my dad shook my hand differently. Not casually, firm. Intentional. "Good work," he said. Simple words, but I held on to them longer than I should have, because I thought they meant something permanent. Growth didn't explode overnight, but once it started, it didn't stop. That one contract led to referrals. Smaller clients turned into bigger ones. Within 2 years, we moved into a larger warehouse, hired more staff, and stopped worrying about whether we'd survive the next month. Now we were thinking about expansion, and I was at the center of it. I didn't wait for instructions. I stepped into problems before they became crises. I built systems where there were none, streamlined operations, negotiated deals, and trained people who eventually relied on me more than anyone else. Most days, I worked longer than my dad, but I didn't mind, because I believed I was building something that would eventually belong to me too. He started introducing me differently. "This is my daughter, she's..." "The reason this works," he'd say. That mattered, more than it should have. Clients respected me. Employees depended on me. Decisions ran through me. And slowly, I stopped seeing myself as just his daughter. I saw myself as his partner. Outside of work, everything else faded. Friends drifted. Relationships didn't last. I missed moments I couldn't get back. But I told myself it was temporary. Because this was bigger. We weren't just building a company. We were building something permanent. Or at least, that's what I believed. My brother, Aaron, wasn't part of any of that. While I was buried in work, he moved through life differently, testing ideas, shifting directions, never staying long enough to struggle. He'd show up occasionally, observe quietly, ask a few questions, then disappear again. At the time, I didn't think much of it, until he started showing up more often. At first, it felt harmless. He'd sit in meetings, listen more than he spoke, and pay attention in a way I didn't fully understand. I even tried helping him explaining systems, breaking down decisions, sharing what I had learned through years of trial and error. He didn't interrupt. He didn't challenge. He just listened. And then, gradually, he started speaking. Not often, but at the right moments. He didn't focus on details. He focused on people, tone, timing, presence. Clients liked him. Employees responded to him. Where I was precise, he was effortless. I noticed the difference, but I didn't see it as a threat because I believed something that had always been true for me, that the person who does the work is the one who earns the position. By the time I turned 27, we had built something I once thought was impossible. Multiple locations, a growing team, stable revenue. Then came the valuation, over $60 million. I remember standing alone in my office, staring out at the city, waiting to feel something different. But the city didn't change. I did, because for the first time, I understood the scale of what I had helped create. This wasn't just a business anymore, it was an empire. My dad called it our legacy. That word stayed with me. Legacy meant permanence. It meant shared ownership. It meant everything we sacrificed had meaning beyond just profit. But around that same time, something subtle began to shift. Aaron wasn't just attending meetings anymore. He was being included in decisions. At first, it was small. A comment here, an opinion there. Then it grew. My dad started asking for his input more often, especially in front of others. I noticed it, but I didn't question it. Because I believed something that would later cost me everything. That what I had built couldn't be taken away. The shift didn't happen all at once. If it had, I would have seen it. I would have reacted. I would have asked questions before things went too far. But this was quiet. Aaron started speaking more in meetings, not often, but enough to be noticed. And when he did, he didn't introduce new ideas. He reframed mine, simplified them, made them easier to agree with. Clients responded. My dad noticed. Good point, he'd say, even when I had already covered it. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. Different styles, same outcome. But it kept happening. Meetings I led would slowly shift direction, not away from strategy but toward him. Meanwhile, I stayed focused on execution, the details. The things that actually kept the business moving. Nothing I did changed, but how it was seen did. And for the first time, something unfamiliar crept in. Not doubt in my ability, but doubt in my position. Because I started to realize something I hadn't before. Being essential doesn't always mean being visible. And in business, visibility shapes power. The shift moved beyond meetings. It spread through the company. Employees who used to come directly to me began including Aaron in conversations. Emails that once came straight to my inbox now had him copied in. At first, I assumed it was coincidence. Then I realized it wasn't. It was alignment. People weren't just responding to authority anymore, they were responding to presence. And Aaron was everywhere. He moved through the office differently than I did. Quick conversations, casual check-ins, remembering small details about people's lives. It wasn't technical, but it was effective. Meanwhile, I stayed buried in work, solving problems, maintaining systems, making sure everything actually functioned. The company was growing because of what I was doing, but internally, something else was growing too. Influence. And it wasn't mine. That's when I faced the truth I didn't want to accept. I had built the engine, but I wasn't controlling the narrative anymore. I couldn't ignore it anymore. So I went to my dad, not angry, not accusing, just direct. We sat in his office late one evening, the same place where we had built everything from scratch. I need clarity, I said. He leaned back, studying me. About what? The future, leadership, structure. Where this is going? There was a pause, longer than I expected. You're both important, he said. Both. That word landed harder than anything else. We'll figure it. Out, he added. But there was no detail, no timeline, no structure, just something vague enough to end the conversation. I nodded. But as I walked out, something didn't sit right, because for the first time in years, I didn't feel secure, and that feeling didn't go away. The meeting was scheduled without explanation. Be here early. Tomorrow, my dad said. That was it. No agenda, no context. I didn't think much of it at first. We had early meetings all the time, usually tied to something important, but something about his tone stayed with me. It was too controlled, too calm. The next morning, I arrived before everyone else. The office was quiet, still. When I walked into the conference room, Aaron was already there, sitting back in his chair, relaxed, like he had been expecting me. We exchanged a brief look. He nodded. No tension, no curiosity, just certainty. And that's when a thought crossed my mind quick, almost instinctive. What does he know that I don't? I pushed it aside and sat down. A few minutes later, my dad walked in, closed the door, and took his seat. Then he took a slow breath, and everything changed. I've been thinking about the future, my dad began. His voice was steady, too steady. I'm stepping back from the business. That part didn't surprise me. He had hinted at it before. What came next did. I've decided who will take over. There was a pause, just long enough for certainty to settle in. After everything I had done, it felt obvious. Then he said it. Aaron will take over leadership. He's better suited for where the company is going. The second sentence hit harder than the first, because it wasn't just a decision. It was a judgment. For a moment, nothing made sense. I let out a small laugh, waiting for the correction. It never came. Aaron didn't react. My dad didn't repeat himself. And slowly, the reality settled in. This wasn't a discussion. It wasn't open for debate. It had already been decided. And just like that, everything I thought I had built my place on was gone. I laughed. I didn't mean to, it just slipped out. A short, disoriented reaction, like my mind was trying to reject what I had just heard. But no one else laughed. Aaron sat still, calm, like this moment had already happened for him. My dad didn't correct himself. He didn't soften it. He didn't explain. That's when the weight of it started to settle in. This isn't serious, I said, looking between them. Silence. I turned back to my dad. What does that make me? For a second, just a second, I thought I saw something in his eyes. Hesitation. Maybe even guilt. Then it was gone. You'll figure something out, he said. Flat. Final. No acknowledgement of the years I had given. No recognition of what I had built. No explanation. Just dismissal. Something inside me didn't break. It shifted, quietly, because in that moment, I understood something I hadn't allowed myself to see before. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a decision that had already been made. I looked at Aaron again, searching for something, anything, a reaction, discomfort, even surprise. There was none. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't news to him. It was confirmation. I don't remember leaving the room. I remember standing. I remember the chair scraping against the floor. Then everything blurred. The hallway felt longer than usual. The office, my office, felt unfamiliar. Like I was walking through a place that no longer belonged to me. People nodded as I passed, smiled, completely unaware that something had just ended. I got into my car and sat there, hands on the wheel, not moving. My mind replayed the moment over and over. Not just what was said, but what wasn't. No warning, no conversation, no transition, just a decision that erased everything I thought I had earned. Eventually, I started the engine. I don't remember the drive home. That night, I sat in silence, staring at nothing, trying to find the point where it all shifted, the moment I missed. Because something like this doesn't happen overnight, which meant I had been standing inside the change the entire time and never saw it. The next morning, my phone didn't stop ringing. Messages, calls, emails, employees asking for direction, clients needing decisions. Conversations that used to depend on me. I didn't answer any of them because I didn't know what I was anymore. Was I still part of the company? Did I have authority? Or had that been taken too? I turned my phone face down and let it ring until it stopped. Hours passed, then days, for the first time in nearly a decade. I didn't go into the office, not because I didn't want to, because I didn't know if I was allowed to. That thought stayed with me longer than anything else. Allowed, after everything I had built. I started replaying the years in my head, the sacrifices, the risks, the decisions that carried weight. And one question kept coming back. When did this really start? Because it wasn't that meeting. That was just the moment it became visible. 3 days later, I got my answer. Not from my dad, not from Aaron, from someone who wasn't supposed to say anything. One of our senior managers reached out, carefully. Like even contacting me felt risky. We met outside the office. He didn't waste time. There were changes happening, he said. Behind the scenes. My chest tightened. What kind of changes? Ownership, structure, legal positioning. The words didn't fully register at first. Then they did. There were documents, he continued, signed months ago, maybe longer. I felt something drop in my chest. How long? I asked. He hesitated, then said it. Over a year. A year. That meant while I was expanding the business, securing deals, building systems, something else was being built at the same time, quietly, without me. That was the moment everything became clear. Not emotionally, logically. This wasn't sudden. It wasn't reactive. It was planned, carefully, patiently, over time. While I was focused on growth, they were focused on control. And I wasn't part of that conversation. I went home and sat with that realization longer than anything else. Not the anger, not the betrayal, just the truth. I had built something real, something valuable, but I had never owned it. Not legally, not structurally, not in any way that actually mattered when decisions were made. All those years, I believed effort was enough, that loyalty meant security, that being essential made me untouchable. I was wrong. And once I accepted that, everything changed. Because clarity doesn't comfort you. It forces you to decide. Clarity didn't come with motivation. It came with a choice. I could keep replaying what happened, going over every missed sign. Every moment I should have questioned sooner, or I could accept the truth and move forward, not emotionally, strategically. Because once I stripped everything down to facts, one thing became undeniable. I had helped build a $60 million company from almost nothing. That didn't disappear just because I wasn't there anymore. The knowledge was still mine. The discipline was still mine. And for the first, as a time, I asked myself a different question. Not, why did they do this? But, what do I do now? The answer wasn't dramatic. It was simple. Start again, but this time, do it right. Starting over didn't feel powerful. It felt quiet, uncomfortable. No office, no team, no structure, just a laptop, a notebook, and years of experience that suddenly had no name attached to it. The first few days were the hardest. Not because of the work, but because of the silence. No constant messages, no urgent problems. No pressure pulling me in 10 directions, just space. And in that space, doubt tried to settle in, but I didn't let it stay. Instead, I started writing everything down. What worked? What failed? What I ignored before, that I would never ignore again. For the first time, I wasn't reacting, I was designing. And that shift changed everything. My first move wasn't big, it was precise. I reached out to a former client not to take them away aggressively. Not to compete directly, but to offer something specific, something better, something I knew they weren't getting anymore. I didn't oversell. I didn't pressure. I simply showed them what I could. Deliver clearly, confidently, without noise. There was a pause after I finished. Then they said yes. Just like that. That moment mattered more than the deal itself, because it confirmed something I needed to know. I wasn't successful because of the company. The company had been successful because of me. And that realization changed how I saw everything moving forward. One client became 2, then 3. Not overnight, but steadily. And this time, I built everything differently. Every agreement was documented, every role clearly defined, every decision structured in a way that couldn't be quietly taken from me. No assumptions, no "we'll figure it out later." No blind trust. I paid attention to things I had ignored before. Ownership terms, control clauses, decision rights, the invisible parts of business that matter the most when everything is on the line. Because I had learned the hard way. If it's not written, it's not real. Momentum returned, but it felt different this time. Controlled, intentional. There was no chaos. No scrambling to keep up. Just steady progress. Then something unexpected happened. I started hearing things about the old company. At first, it was small, missed deadlines, confusion between teams, clients asking questions that shouldn't have needed answers. Nothing serious, but enough to notice. I didn't react. I didn't reach out. I just listened, because I understood something they didn't. What I had built wasn't just growth, it was structure. And without that structure, things don't fall apart immediately. They weaken first, then they crack. Growth didn't just return, it accelerated. Not because I was working harder, but because I was no longer guessing. Every decision I made came from experience. Patterns I had learned the hard way now worked in my favor. Within a year, I had built something new. Not massive, but precise. A smaller, sharper team. People I chose carefully, people who understood structure, accountability, and clarity. There were no blurred roles, no assumptions. Everything was defined. And because of that, everything moved faster. Clients stayed longer, operations ran cleaner, problems were solved before they escalated. But more importantly, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Control. Not over people, not over outcomes, but over my direction. For the first time, I wasn't building under someone else's authority. I was building something that couldn't be quietly taken from me. And that changed everything. The updates about the old company became harder to ignore. What started as small issues turned into patterns, missed deadlines, internal miscommunication, clients quietly stepping back. At first, I told myself it was normal. Every business faces challenges. But this felt different, because I recognized the problems. They weren't random, they were structural. The systems I had built, the ones that held everything together, were either being ignored or misunderstood. And without them, things started slipping. Slowly at first, then more noticeably. I heard about key employees leaving, long-term clients reconsidering contracts, decisions being made without understanding their long-term impact. It wasn't dramatic, it was predictable, and that made it harder to process, because I knew exactly how it could have been prevented. The message came late one evening, from my dad. We should talk. I stared at it longer than I expected. A year ago, I would have responded immediately. Now, I didn't feel urgency. I felt distance. I didn't reply right away, not out of anger, but because I finally understood something I hadn't before. Access is earned. And for the first time, he didn't automatically have mine. When I did respond, I kept it simple. About what? His reply came quickly. The business. Of course it was. It always had been. But this time, the situation was different. Because this time, I didn't need it. We met a few days later. Same building, same office, same room where everything had changed. But this time, I walked in differently, not hoping to belong, not waiting to be recognized, just present. My dad looked older, tired in a way I hadn't noticed before. Aaron wasn't there. That stood out. We've had some challenges, my dad said. That was an understatement, he explained. The situation, clients leaving, internal instability, decisions that didn't go as planned. I listened, quietly. Then he paused. We could use your help. There it was. Not an apology, not acknowledgement, a request. I let the silence sit for a moment. Then I asked one question. Why would I come back? He didn't answer immediately. And when he finally spoke, there was nothing solid behind it. And that told me everything I needed to know. I didn't go back, not because I couldn't help, but because I finally understood something that took me years to learn. Not every door deserves to be reopened. I walked away from that meeting without anger, without the need for validation, without the need to prove anything, because I already had the business I helped build. Before, that proved what I could do under pressure. The one I built after? That proved who I actually was. Stronger, sharper, unshakable. They took the company I helped build, but they couldn't take the ability that built it in the first place. And in the end, that mattered more. Because this time, everything I created was protected, owned, and fully mine. No assumptions, no blind trust, no gaps, just clarity. And I used to think success meant building something big with the people you trust. Now I know it means building something that can't be taken from you, no matter who turns their back. I used to think success meant building something big with the people you trust. Now I know it means building something that can't be taken from you no matter who turns their back. They gave away the company, but they gave me something more valuable: clarity. And once you have that, you stop building for approval and start building for yourself.